What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, Thaddeus Thundercock here, and we're back with episode 53 of the video game therapy series. I haven't recorded one of these in a while, this isn't a point to be making excuses, but I'm just, I want to even just self-justify why I feel like I'm not making more, but I just felt like a blank slate some of these days, you know, or just, I don't really, maybe I'm just so preoccupied. I think that's probably a decent explanation for it, is I am preoccupied by so many other things that I haven't really given myself the leisure necessary to get into some of these topics. Because I generally feel like I'm most overflooded with these kind of more abstract, I don't know, thoughts about society and philosophy only when I'm not doing something, which this may sound like, oh, well, then the solution is to just be busy all the time, and that way I won't have to, never have an excuse to be thinking about any of this. But I actually think that's the wrong, I think that would be wrong of me to purposely deflate the amount of time I have in leisure so as to avoid these kind of discussions. Because I think this thinking and this, you know, I say discussion really with tongue-in-cheek because it's, you know, it's to me, myself. But I view this as more constructive than any of the distractions I would be doing otherwise. Now, I also say distractions kind of tongue-in-cheek because to most, you know, work or school or anything else that they're doing is often the epitome of what isn't a distraction. They treat those themes as central, whereas something like this would be a distraction. But I don't view it that way, really. I think there's, if I look at it from, again, maybe a selfish perspective of what I get more out of, meaning that, do I feel like I develop myself more doing this, thinking about, you know, all the stuff that I think about during these things, or do I get more development out of, you know, I don't know, finishing some homework assignment that I truly don't care about? So I don't know. Part of me is also glad that I'm kind of inundated with that mindset, because I think the more I'm belabored by doing stuff all the time, the more the slower time passes, and I think for the next few months I kind of need time to pass quickly, and I hate that I'm wishing away parts of my time, but I feel like there is only a few times in my life where I've wished time to go a little faster so I could just get this part over with, because it isn't really, again, because have so many other things to do that I can't really get rid of without it being more trouble than it's worth in the long run. I have no choice but to kind of wish away, you know, some of the stuff that I have going on now. But anyway, we're back today. Got a couple topics and things I want to discuss. One idea or one thing I had was, I guess, clarifying my discussion around the currency of the modern age. So I think I kind of mentioned almost in passing that the currency of the modern age, I say the information age, because that's kind of what hallmarks our digital age now is information, you know, the passage and transfer of information and everything that comes with that, you know, from big data, essentially. You know, you can call them big tech, but really it's just big data, because ultimately that's all or most of what they're doing with, so their foci is just gather as much data as they can, ultimately to be used to create and peddle products that are, you know, are money. But then calling everything big money is kind of stupid, but big data. But anyway, data is really just is information. You know, it's about us. It's useful information for something, right? About specific people and demographics, et cetera, all for business cases in this scenario, but regardless. But I said that the currency of this is trust, and I suppose to put it in other terms, so you can, I don't know, draw the political ties to what context I'm saying this in. I think Marx said that the currency of an industrial age, which is kind of what we're exiting now, I suppose. We're not really exiting; we're just kind of evolving from an industrial age, a primarily industrial age, signified by like improved technology for the means of production, but the means of production being the ultimate power, or the currency, I suppose, of that age. So the people that own the factories and the, I guess, quote unquote advanced technology, which is becoming more archaic now, only as technology continues to evolve. But instead of owning the means of production, like the warehouses and the things, which granted, I'm not arguing that those don't make money anymore. Those aren't the quote unquote currency of the age. I think we're evolving past that into the currency being that of trust. Because I think especially with the rise of the main medium in which information is disseminated from you onto these, again, big data platforms, as I say, is through content generation or content consumption. That's such a hallmark of modern digital life, and that ultimately hinges on trust more so than the means of production, right? You wouldn't really care, how quickly or how effectively your food was being produced, rather that you just got to eat food, right? But now that information has such a premium, people want to know, right? The knowledge of knowing is important to them beyond all else. So I think, I don't know, I feel like that rendered that desired more clarification when I said that just the currency of the modern age was trust. And I'm sure there's more, I guess, specifics or semantics I can go into with that, but I'll kind of leave it at that until I come back to it, until my mind comes back to it, so to speak. But I suppose with that in mind, something I'm seeing that I want to, I don't know, kind of elaborate on and think about more is centralization as just an idea, and obviously we're seeing more of that. And I read somewhere that again, I'm not citing a study here, so the source being I read somewhere is legitimate, but I read somewhere that looking throughout the course of history, things have tended to centralize, right? We kind of went from decentralized, I don't know, again, hunter-gatherer societies to creating larger communities, which then created larger communities, and now cities are still, obviously if you look at the year to year and say, the influx of cities is growing, but regardless, we're centralizing more of even our online activity, right? The centralization of our activity to only, a handful of web domains is still centralization. Now, granted, maybe there's people, more people are moving out to the woods or something like that, but I see that more as a reactionary idea than like a centralized, like things are not becoming more central. I don't see that as being antithetical to my point, but regardless, I want to think about if the consequences of things becoming more and more centralized, and why this isn't a shill for a decentralized currency either. I'm just and to put myself firmly on here as an aside, I'm not like a no coiner. I'm not someone that denounces all cryptocurrencies. I think there is good value to at least some of them more than others, obviously. I think Bitcoin's kind of stupid. I think people that think they know what Bitcoin is and don't really realize that what Bitcoin is, Monero is what Bitcoin is thought of to be, right? Like a privacy-centric, you can kind of, huddle your money away from the government, doesn't know anything. Like, no, Bitcoin is arguably more traceable than, like, Bank of America. Monero is more so the what I think would be the actual technological equivalent to what the sociological Bitcoin is. That being said, I guess I do think, like, if I had a bunch of extra money, I'd probably buy some more Monero. But outside of that, there are so many other, I'd say 99.99% of projects I could care less about. Other ones that I think have some intrinsic value beyond, again, just kind of hype, or whatever their stock price is at the moment, are ones that are that take into account, like, post-quantum computing. So I know there's some coins that have encryption that is quantum proof, meaning that once quantum computers are developed, they will still be safe from encryption. And I think Monero is susceptible to a quantum proof attack, and I'm sure there are other coins that meet those criteria. But regardless, at a certain point, the popularity of something does come into play. Now, the utility comes first, in my opinion, but the popularity still is a factor. It's not like just because the utility is the best, it's going to be the most popular. Because I mean, we even see that with regular currencies. Like the U.S. dollar is the most popular. Now, is it more useful than like the yen or something? Well, yes, because it is more popular, but that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's not like intrinsically more valuable for any reason other than the fact that it is more popular. But cryptocurrencies, because there are technical differences between them, and popularity can wane and grow, without like centralized authority. There's more differences and more nuance with kind of analyzing cryptocurrency than it would be regular currencies. But anyway, back to the the topic of decentralization, or just centralization, and why I think it's a threat. Obviously, like technologically, I think it's threatening because it creates a single point of failure. And that's obvious in any kind of threat model you have. If there's one spot where everything can fall apart, or it can get bottlenecked, or if there's too much or too little interaction with something. And again, this doesn't really just apply to technological systems, although I do have to say that I'm catering this discussion towards that a little bit, because that's what we're seeing now. We're not really seeing centralization like in terms of like military powers. We're really seeing it a lot on the technology front. So if it seems like I'm talking specifically about technology, I kind of am, but I want to keep the terming itself more abstract, just as an idea, because it doesn't just apply to centralizing technologies or the use of technology being centralized. So it's one thing to have technology itself that's central, like one server hosting something. It's another thing to have the use of it all being central, aka like all of us only go to twitter.com. Those are two different kind of ideas that I still think the discussion can apply on both ends of it. So I don't want to appear like I'm coming on one side of it or the other, but obviously the single point of failure is a problem. The other part that for me, which is more against my personal philosophy, is the dependence on such a system. I think when things become centralized, you're almost provided an ultimatum, right? You can either use this system that maybe you don't like for several reasons, or you don't really like. The alternatives don't exist. And I think one thing that I'll kind of give the free economists a point here is that variety is always nice, especially as like a consumer, I suppose. It's always nice, at least even the illusion of choice, which I think is more common now than having actual choice, is the illusion of choice. Like, you can buy, you can run Mac or Windows, Of course, I'm making a joke there to the Linux distributions that are enumerable, but that's a good, I'm glad those exist, because if those didn't, the illusion of choice between Mac and Windows is picking between two terrible things. Almost like a lot of what politics is boiled down to now. You don't really get, there's no like array of third-party non-traditional candidates. There are two, Democrat or Republican. I'm speaking of American politics, of course. But yeah, and like no one likes that. And you see like this big political dissent in general, only because, again, I think it's become very, very centralized, and people generally don't like the fact that they have pretty much no choice, right? They have a bad choice or no choice at all, which many decide just to have no choice at all, which is totally fire. I don't fault people for that, but the illusion of choice being in some ways a bigger problem than having no choice at all. But yeah, the fact that you have to become dependent on something, especially when the like workaroundable solutions become they're like just putting up barriers to people doing it themselves. So I guess one option would be like growing your own food, like that dependence on. Obviously, there's a lot of good that comes with not having to grow your own food all the time, and those are centralized. There's centralized bodies and authorities that create and regulate food, right? It's good I'm not getting sick, and there's centralization to some extent there, but the moment it like you make it almost ecologically more difficult to grow food, like as if this would be the equivalent of making it abundantly more difficult to grow your own food as it is already, right? So these are, I don't know, like regulations that maybe only would apply to people trying to grow their own food. Like let's say the government outlawed you growing, your own mushrooms, or not mushrooms. That's a terrible example. Like zucchini or something totally innocuous. I'm not talking about magic mushrooms. I was just thinking about a vegetable or something. But yeah, they made it illegal or something, or not even illegal, that you had to get all seeds approved through some agency first, right? And I think it's an obvious problem with that. Like why, if it's great that, again, it's very, very easy to get seeds, and this regulation you've imposed isn't making it any easier to get seeds, on a massive scale for the companies that make it now. But now you're just making it difficult on people that want to be independent of it. And I think not giving people an option to be independent of systems that are becoming centralized is an issue. So that's kind of like a food example. The technology example would be like, I don't know, like hosting your own service. And I recently just set up my own server to do things, and I'm glad that it was possible for someone like me who isn't. I haven't spent 40 years setting up servers, so it's not like, obviously it wasn't the easiest thing in the world, but it's certainly very, very possible for someone who's not a complete moron. The same as I would hope if I wanted to start growing, bell peppers or something. I wouldn't want, somebody breathing down my neck. I wouldn't have to jump through a bunch of hoops to be able to grow bell peppers. I would want to just buy some seeds, plant them, water them, and then be able to harvest them without using approved farming, like hoeing equipment or something like that, which, I would assume it'd be just, I would hope that it's just as possible to do something. And it's not, again, obviously part of the reason I set up my own server was as a philosophical dispute on not wanting to use any of these cloud providers that have become more and more centralized. Like, I don't think there's a single startup now that I'm sure there are one, but no one buys their own servers anymore and like bothers to configure them at all. They all just either buy into AWS, Google Cloud, or Microsoft. That's it. And then they just do a self-scaling option. And yeah, obviously, like if my server was overrun, I'd run into scaling problems and yada yada yada. But I'd have way more problems to deal with if my and I suppose that's what they're selling is, oh, in case you do get a bunch of traffic, you won't have to worry about the problems that you come into. But then you become independent. Let's say that obviously in the short run it's a bunch more work, but in the long run I have full control over my own server. I can do anything I want with it, right? And I don't pay anybody to do anything with it, right? And if it goes offline, it's my fault, and if it doesn't, it's still my fault. There's no abstraction out of my hands with the service, which I think is good for some people to have. Now, I understand that there's lots of people that you don't have an opinion, right? Or you don't care. You would never be the one to set up your server. But I think the point is, and not like the same way, I would probably be never someone, I'm not going to say this, actually, I probably shouldn't, but I would probably never be someone that would grow their own food. I would probably never do that. Now, I might, but do I think just because I don't grow my own food, I would want it to make it impossible for someone else? No, I would want to make it easy. I would want to make it like as easy as it is already. I wouldn't want to make it more difficult for people not to grow their own food just because I don't grow my own food. So in the same way with technology, I don't want to make it more difficult for someone else to do something just because I don't want to do it. And like maybe if you go down to like the hardware level, right? So like let's say some hobbyist wants to make their own processor. Here's an example I really don't care about. I would never want to make my own processor. I don't really care about like the specifics of. I wouldn't want to be soldering my own transit. I would hate to do all of that. That sounds terrible. I'd rather just look at the specs of the processor and buy it versus having to solder my own. But why would I want it to make it more difficult for someone who did want to do that to do it, right? I think this even just kind of brings in the idea of the right to repair movement as a whole. That's kind of a whole sub-movement behind this, is that, no, of course, like, I don't know how to fix my car, and I don't really care. Most of the time, I'm just going to pay somebody to do it, but somebody should have an ability to fix a car if they want to, and I shouldn't make it more difficult to them. But the reason this relates to centralization, is that when things become centralized, it becomes much easier for, I guess, these power grabs and things, and I guess even just the moats that you can create, barriers to entry you can create by having all the power. It's much easier to impose it on, smaller parties, and the larger things get, I think the more likely it is that things happen. I don't know if there's any example in any context that as things get larger, they get more free. Generally, as things centralize and consolidate, they generally get less and less modular. That's kind of by nature, right? The larger, the less flexibility they can have, only because they're working at such a large scale. In the same way, if you had, a company of some kind, as your user base grows, you're not able to like be so, cater and be super specific to people and individual needs and whatnot. And again, people can claim whatever they want, but ultimately, like if I called Google saying, "Oh, I want this, individualized server," they'd be like, they'd laugh at me, because they're like, "No, we don't do that." And maybe Google 25 years ago, if I was a big enough client, if I was, their first or second customer, they would. But now that they're huge, they don't care if I don't do business with them. In fact, it's not worth their trouble. So they don't bother individualizing solutions, or they don't care that much about the individual is abstracted from that. And I view that as a threat to I guess, liberty in some sense. But it's a symptom of centralization as a larger idea. So when things become centralized, personal liberties and freedoms are more likely to be under attack. So I don't know. That's why I think fighting for decentralization to some extent is a worthy and noble cause, as an idea, and it's, and a lot of times it doesn't even, what people who are fighting for decentralized or personal liberty, they're not really fighting against even because these large companies are big enough that they're not, they just want to retain even existing liberties that they had before the fact, right? So they don't want to make things purposely more cumbersome, only because there's a centralized authority that now governs it all. They just want to not obstruct and make it more difficult before. So keep it as difficult as it is now to grow crops. Keep it as difficult as it is now to set up a server. Anything else that happens, adding more and more layers of complexity via centralization and making it difficult. And you have to, I don't know. Now that you get, I think there's one point where you didn't really, even domains itself wasn't central. Now I think all domains are really owned by just a few, a few companies that own things. You can't really set up and own your domain yourself. Now, again, I know this is an example I don't do that much about, but either way, I think it just is a dangerous precedent to set, centralizing things and making it more and more difficult for the individual person, even if it's something you'd never do. I would never want to open my car and fix it up. I don't care that much about cars, so it's worth it for me to pay somebody. But I would fight to defend somebody's who wanted to do that, their right to do so. Right? I'm not going to make it more difficult for someone to fix their car for any reason. I don't care. It should be, they bought it, it's their car. They should be able to do what they want with it. But I don't know. That's kind of like a right to repair idea, I think, more than anything. But I don't know. I think I view it as an argument around centralization, period. But anyway, I guess along those the same lines, I don't often. I think people make a problematic choice in choosing individuals as the. Take a drink here. Hang on. Picking individuals as the target for their opposition, right? Or finding an individual who represents an enemy of some sort. I think it's just easy to see one individual person who's done something bad or is doing something bad or whatever, and then using that as something to hinge on the argument against an entire system. So you see this a lot with just politicians and actors and anyone who's a scumbag at just a large scale. You just tend to pick them out and be like, "Oh, this person is everything that's wrong with yada yada yada." And it makes sense. I tend not to choose individuals and oust them as being entirely evil. I mean, at this point, I've even mentioned Hitler in a lot of my prior conversations. It's not because I'm defending him in any way. It's only because I think it's a misnomer. It's the wrong idea to attack individuals themselves for larger ideas, right? So if you're coming at, let's say you're attacking an economic system, like, oh, I'm attacking capitalism. I think it's stupid to attack a capitalist, right, or an individual person. Now, granted, yes, there's probably terrible things that some greedy capitalist has done, like Trump or some moron. But then when you make it about an individual, you lose sight of the argument itself, which is often has nothing to do with the individual, right? Because then you start talking about, oh, he was sexually assaulting girls, or all this other crap that they do. But again, you can't look at individuals when you're making arguments against entire systems. So I don't really have a beef with individuals themselves. A lot of the times, I can rationalize, understand why they did what they did. Now, granted, I could disagree, and I can think what they did is evil and stupid, and maybe I think most of what they do is evil and stupid. Sure, but ultimately, like it's still like, I guess, morally reprehensible in the fact, or reprehensible in the fact that it's not unfathomable to see why they might have done something. It's just because they wanted more money for themselves. They wanted, they were worried, they were scared of something, right? They wanted to consult. I don't know. There's all kinds of reasons individuals might have done something, but I more often try to attack the institutions themselves that they represent and defend. So it's not, maybe it's not the person being bad as a whole. It's their characteristic that I don't like. So, for example, I am obviously not a fan of big data companies, aka big tech, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, Apple. And it's not that I don't hate everybody that works there and think everyone who works there should go quit. And there's plenty of reasons why someone would want to work there and does work there, right? And I don't, and yeah, of course I wish that they didn't, and they chose against that, against that decision. But ultimately, I don't despise the individuals themselves. I despise the institutions that they represent, which is often nobody, right? Even the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, or whatever his name is. I don't hate him. I don't yeah, of course I think what he represents is bad, and but I don't know the scale of his I mean, obviously he's the CEO, so he has some influence, but I don't I know it's not entirely up to him. And if I were the backs of all the shareholders of Google and these people, if he does something negative that hurts Google, someone could probably have him killed. The people on that the board of trustees or whatever at Google, I assume are powerful enough people to sway the tides of modern society, and are not people that I'd want to piss off. So if I were in his scenario, I'm not even sure, aside from regrettably retiring or wanting to spend more time with family or something like that, there's not much else. I can't really hate on the guy's actions for what he does. And even the board of trustees, you might try to single them out as the enemy, but even then, individually, I think they're all acting in an interest that is admirable, right? They're all trying to, now granted, they probably don't know when enough is enough, but they're trying to get money for their family and have their kids go to to college or whatever, and their grandkids go to college, or of course, obviously, to normal people, it's like, dude, what the hell's wrong with you? You guys have plenty. Your kids are all shitheads anyway. They probably don't deserve to go to college, and by the time they go to college will be a meaningless exercise anyway. But regardless, I think individually, I don't hate any one of them, right? I think if I didn't know any better and I met them, I wouldn't outright, it wouldn't be like I just walked into, Hitler in full uniform. I wouldn't, feel the need to, I don't know, call the police or something. But as a larger part of what they represent, as in this case, the board of trustees of Google, they defend and represent that institution, which collectively is problematic and is the problem. So I think the larger point behind all of this is that I don't hate the individuals. I almost never try to fault the individuals for what they've done, because oftentimes I try to assume it's from the best place, right? And if I was in their scenario, under their, I would like to think I did something similar. Now, granted, that's not always true. Sometimes I'm baffled at the decisions that individuals make, but ultimately I have no control over that anyway. But I tend to put more, I don't know, more of my negative effort and energy towards the institutions themselves that they choose to represent, or that they represent, period. Maybe they have no choice, right? Because in some cases, somebody's, the best thing they can do is have to go work at Apple or Google. And it's not that they don't, not that they're maybe, yeah, maybe they're a little too excited about it and they don't realize that, what the evil they're causing, because they're just worried about the paycheck and, their family or whatever. So they kind of lose sight of the bigger picture. But regardless, there's plenty of scenarios in which I see that being the best decision for them. So I don't really hate them for it, but it's more so the institutions. And the difficult part with that is institutions, and I'm using this, companies, governments. This is all the same. Institutions encompass all of that, even just groups, anybody. They're often so nebulous and so difficult to. You can't really attack an institution the same way you attack a place, right? Because even if I say, oh, Google did this bad thing, it's like Google's not a person that did a bad thing. Maybe who's even to blame for that? And individuals are the ones that we can easily point at and blame because there's, a physical, there's body attached to them, right? We can look at a human and say, hey, this guy, this bag of carbon is what's responsible for this action. And that's easy. But when I say that, Google, are you going to pull out like an LLC document for what, for Google? No. So what is Google, right? It's a nebulous. We made it up, I guess, as the first step. Is that it's not really real in the sense that a human is real, right? It's real in the eyes of our imagination, in the sense that the legal system and the documents that make that a credible company are also, I guess, figments of our imagination. And I'm using imagination here very loosely. I'm not meaning to say that because it's not physically real in terms of like meat and bone, that it's not real at all. I suppose things that are real to everybody, money's as real to anyone as it is anything else. So we have to treat money as real if we want to participate in society. Same with the legal system. So Google is real, but it's not as attackable as another human, right? As another bag of bones or an animal or something, right? It's not the idea of Google is something separate than what you can attack for. That's why I think it's easier for people just to find individuals that they think represent something and then attack them, right? Which I think is, I don't know, it's kind of foolish, but I get that people don't really have another option in a lot of cases. And it's not like if we can't just decide to kill Google in the sense that we can't just decide to. Does that mean murdering everybody that works at Google? It's like, okay, obviously not. So then what is killing Google? What does that mean? Does that mean making a new piece of paper that, legal document that says that Google can't exist anymore or something like that? And I guess that's the solution that most people would come to, is some sort of regulatory knife in this this non-physical battle. But even then, I think that's still not very satisfying to some people, and that process itself is also incredibly difficult to do. So as an individual, what am I supposed to do against an institution that I don't think is doing the right thing? I don't know, but I think the wrong answer is to attack the individuals that are a part of it just blindly, because they're, for the only reason is just they're a part of it. So I don't know. I try to have some nuance in that side of things, but I will certainly say that I don't often try to fault the individuals, but it's because it's rather the institution's fault. But I realize that the institutions themselves aren't really something you can easily tack or easily dismantle if it's something that's bad. And using the argument that the fact that Google's big company, I don't think using its size or using any of its redeemable qualities either as justification for its existence period is a fair argument, because I think that's just a straw man as attacking an individual for its wrongdoing, right? So don't give credit to its entire being because of some innovation that they did or they're responsible for, because who knows, that might have come up otherwise, or it may have had more. We maybe weren't ready for it yet. And sometimes I think about that with the internet period. And obviously it's had a lot of advancements, and I think as a whole I would love to take it and just accept that it was good just so we have this. But in some ways I don't think, I think we weren't really ready for it on a societal level. We didn't really conceptualize the unintended consequences of it. And of course we have nothing to do now but to try and deal with it. But I don't know. At times I feel like that's the case, and I realize it's, well, then what about all the good stuff that comes with it? And I'm kind of addressed that in the sense that you can't, I can't use the positive attributes to defend its entire existence the same way I can't hold one party of its constituents responsible for all of its negative attributes. So, I don't know. There's not really anyone to blame there, except shaking your fist at the heavens. But that above all is a fruitless venture. So I certainly won't be doing any of that. But anyway, yeah, that was kind of my thought on institutions versus individuals, and I don't know what to do about them, because I don't know. The old ad hominem strategy is well known at this point. Is not something that people are. It's never been effective, and it's not going to be anymore forward. So anyway, yeah, let's do that. This is just a funny aside that is related to the cyber space. I was reading a blog, and somebody used the term Meatspace networking, and I was like, what are they talking about? Is there some like new app or something called Meatspace networking? And then I realized, of course, he was talking about just like physical, like going to a place and like talking to other people as like networking. But he referred to it in the Meatspace plane, which I think is funny. Just a funny way of phrasing it. So you talk about cyberspace and the metaverse, and he said, "Oh, I went to a Meatspace networking event," and I was like, "What are you talking about?" So I don't know. I just thought that was a funny word that I wanted to share in case anyone else gets a laugh out of it. Not that it hits the delivery punch in this medium, but it is what it is. But I guess along the guise of assigning individuals as or even figureheads as the front of our blame or praise for institutions, I've been thinking more and more that people that get recognized and get any kind of public attention are often, more than likely just evaluated by one more or less random action that they've taken, right? So you take a random action, you don't, on any given day, maybe you do some good things, some bad things, some like mostly neutral things, right? You're not out volunteering 24 hours a day or doing other quote unquote noble activities. And a lot of times you're doing just normal stuff, right? But I guess the cyberspace has allowed people to get evaluated on one random action. I'm thinking, of course, if I were to bet on my luck, I'm hoping not to call something into existence here. If I were to get evaluated on one of my random actions, now odds are it's probably something, menial, something that's, man does dishes or something like that. Like that, obviously that's not going to be newsworthy, but you only, picking a newsworthy but yet random action about you is a way that a lot of people might have been represented. So I'm sure that of all the stuff I've ever done over the course of my life, I'm sure you could pick one that is newsworthy and not good. Again, I don't do these often, so I don't think about these quote unquote horrible things I might have done that are newsworthy. Now, again, I'm putting newsworthy kind of in quotes here because what the hell's newsworthy today anyway? But I don't know. I feel some of the things that people have done, like getting into an argument with somebody, and been in the wrong. I've argued with people at parties and at random things, and I was probably totally wrong. But that's kind of like the whole fun of it, was that, part of me was just arguing for argument's sake. Other part was just I didn't like the person, so I was just arguing with them out of principle because I don't like them. And yeah, of course they're probably right, but I don't care. I'm not giving them credit. But of course, if you use that, you clipped it and used that as like, oh my God, as like my one random event, and it's probably newsworthy if you frame it in the right light. If you get a heated part of the argument and I make some really dumb argument there, and then, that becomes what I'm represented as, it's kind of BS, right? And, I kind of try to apply that same filter when I'm looking at other people that are, making their rounds on things. Oh, did you hear about this person I've never heard of? So I Google him, and then, of course, maybe it's like, him yelling at some Walmart employee or something like that. When, I talked about this in the customer service part of my last episode anyway, but who knows? probably done things like that before, and ultimately, yeah, it looks terrible at this scale. But I think making generalizations about this entire person's being on like what could be the worst day of their life, you have no idea. I also try to apply that filter with all of this. If I were evaluated on by society on one of my random actions, yeah, maybe it's like something good I did. Maybe I got caught picking up trash, and that was like, everyone's like, man, this guy's honestly just so awesome. He's just super base, and just look at him picking up trash. It's like, okay, first of all, stop. I'm like just as morally neutral as pretty much everybody else. It's equally likely you could have picked, I don't know. I'm not even sure what I do that would be bad other than just looking at people weird or like, even that. I think if you just took a video of me like walking on the road, I generally look pretty angry, especially when I'm going to the gym. I have like almost this school shooter energy about me, but that's kind of me getting ready to conquer the gym. I'm sure if you took a video and you're like, this guy's a total creep. Look at him. He's just like looking around. Looks like he wants to like hurt everybody. It's like, okay, I'm on the way to the gym, right? And you took like a 2-second video of me, raging, getting ready to, put some weight on my back. And of course I look terrible. And if you evaluate all of my actions based off of what is essentially just one random activity of mine that, again, I don't even think, even on the surface, isn't really bad or good, then, I mean, but I think that's that kind of sucks. And because we operate on such a scale now, that's kind of the way things are. So I don't know. I think we're putting a lot too much attention on individuals and their benefits and their faults, and people do the same thing in the other direction. So they choose somebody who's like, I don't know, they did something good. They started a nonprofit. They raised $10 billion for cancer or something like that. And then all of a sudden we're like, we have to frame them as if they're like these wonderful, like, oh my God, this person's never done anything bad in their entire life, or the extent of their bad actions was like, they missed the trash can once on accident. They didn't know. It's like, no, these people are not saints any more than someone bad is a saint. Like, I think the easiest way is to look back at historical figures that get crucified for like they're terrible or racist or some ridiculous beliefs they had, like Darwin, for example. Like Darwin had, I guess he had a bunch of like super bigoted, racist works and was like saying all this ridiculous stuff. But do I use that to like, oh, we should now disregard his theory of evolution because he was obviously a terrible person who was flawed? And I mean, it's like, no, okay, obviously I'm not gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Yeah, I don't agree with those opinions of his, but that doesn't mean that he had some like that influenced his way about. Because I know that when he proposed his like evolutionary theory, I think he also included like a theory of like races and which one was superior. And like, okay, obviously that's like pretty racist. But honestly, in the context of the time, are you to not expect that? I mean, they were all racist back then anyway, so that would be like an obvious next step. If somebody was like, oh, we found out this new evolution thing. Well, let's apply it to our current lives. Okay, we're all racist and we think that we're better than these people. So let's like, and I guess the argument would be, oh, we're using it to justify a racist thing. But you have to abstract you can't throw the whole baby out with the bathwater there. The arguments and his theories behind the evolution as an idea, independently of his racist ideas, were still good. But you can't disregard all of it because he got same with like Dr. Seuss, right? I think he made a bunch of like blackface cartoons or something. Yeah, probably terrible, but again, that's not, those aren't the ones you read anyway. So, you can't disregard everything he's ever done because of something. I guess this comes back to the same argument of separating the art from the artist. It's kind of the same idea, but you evaluate them on one of their many random actions, which now all of our actions are documented because of, there's cameras everywhere and there's phones all over the place, and if you do anything bad once, it's kind of held over your head in some ways forever, so it can always be used against you. And so my strategy to kind of evade this is to like do as little as possible that is documented, good or bad, because what's the point? You have to do good things only when they're documented. You can't do a good thing if no one's looking. And second, to not put importance on other people's single actions that are good. So if I read something terrible about somebody, I'm not going to assume that they were, a spawn of Satan and this terrible person. Same with somebody who rescued a dog. Okay, sure, I'm sure they're good, but they've probably been wrong before too. So I think we want to view things as concrete and infallible when humans are the opposite of that. So deploying a lot of nuance when it comes to evaluating an action by somebody is important. I don't know. It's just easy and sensational to be, or it's easy to be sensational about somebody being all bad or all good. That I don't know. It's easier for me to see somebody that punted a baby and go, wow, this guy's a complete piece of shit. This guy deserves to be in hell under all the layers of the prisons and everything. Just throw this guy out. Okay, sure, yeah, he punted a baby. All right, you think that's all he does all day? He's never done anything. What if we caught him, instead of catching him on video punting a baby, we caught him saving a dog? Then we're going to say about him. Why wouldn't you just take like a modest, neutral stance to all of it? Of course, I understand why like larger news organizations would inflate stories about things, but I think even individuals that cover quote unquote newsworthy events, why would you bother trying to paint somebody in one light or the other, right? Take their actions as not representative of what they are, but as as one data point, right? It's easy for us to try to draw representative conclusions. If you only look for the racist and crappy stuff that Darwin has done, you're going to see Darwin as some racist, crappy person, obviously. But why wouldn't you just view him as, okay, he's inherently flawed, but individual that has just as much capability to contribute as anyone else. So that doesn't invalidate any of his scientific discoveries, but it also doesn't really excuse his behaviors either, right? I think I don't want this to come across as me excusing bad behavior, but I think it's just we're lacking nuance in viewing a lot of people's behavior. So I tend to be very, very non-absolutist when it comes to this stuff. So I don't know. I think there's just a lot of that going around, and maybe that's too political, but I don't know. It's I'm done talking about it for now. Speaking of doing and saying unsavory things, at times I feel like being and this again maybe goes contrary on the surface. It goes contrary to what I just said, but I feel like the need to not be so modest sometimes. I feel like a lot of times the people who live and die by very, very modest actions tend to get suffocated by people who hold extreme views and kind of take extreme stances. This is okay. I want to very much detach this from the previous conversation. This has nothing to do with any kind of political or economic or social ideology at all. This is more so just on philosophical principles that one lives by. So I think people that live by very, maybe like, maybe, yes, no, kind of philosophies are often outweighed by people who have strong, who have more conviction maybe in their, in how they and why they do what they do. So, I don't know. I think because if you are very so-so or wishy-washy, you become negotiable. And when things are negotiable, let's say just take an easy example. All right, in my philosophy, exercising is not a hobby. It is a requirement. I must exercise, and I must be physically improving myself or trying to at all times. That's a requirement. Now, the scientist in me wants to go, well, let's have some nuance here. What if you become physically unable to, or what if there's some other, what if you're emotionally distressed, and sure, I could sit here and I could ponder there's an exception here, maybe, there's some nuance here. No, I think in a scenario like this, especially when it's a philosophy like that, it actually helps me to be an extremist on this and say, you know what? No, there is no circumstance under which I will jeopardize this philosophical viewpoint. Because the moment it becomes a negotiation, the stronger party can win out. There's always this debate. Versus if I just take an extremist position and an absolute idea behind it, I remove any discussion. Now, it's important to note that this doesn't take precedence on everything. I think especially if you talk about, economic viewpoints or social or political ideas, I think nuance is much more appreciated there. But for personal philosophies on things, I'm tending more towards more extreme, yes and no's, right? So another one that I've kind of decided on is the production over consumption. I want to produce vastly more than I want to consume. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I could say, well, the consumption might allow for more ideas, and I could, I have time to think more if there's more consumption. I say, nope. I think black and white. It is better for me to be making something than it is for me to be consuming something. Period. I don't care. That black and white doesn't say I can never consume anything. Obviously, it's not that black and white. But the idea that I could debate and rationalize to myself why it might be more worthwhile for me to watch a movie than it would be to record one of these, there's no debate. It's black. It's producing is better than consuming 100 times out of 100. And I think that's like the nature of the philosophies and the extremist tendencies that I think I need to that I'm kind of imposing on myself in some way. So it's not that I'm taking extremist views on, like, again, political or social ideas, but something like that is where I think it's necessary to be an extremist. To not give any leeway or no discussion. I could watch this movie, or I could watching YouTube is always less productive than me actually making something with my time. Doesn't matter what that is. I don't care if I make some super crappy anything. It is more worthwhile than me watching or doing something or diddling around doing nothing. Because ultimately what that a lot of that is, or eating something. Anyway, maybe I'll get to more of what my specific philosophies that I take extremist views on next time. But for now, I'll have to kind of leave it off on that edge. But there are more things that I want to talk about in relation to that. But anyway, that's kind of one half of a thought that I'll hopefully finish up next time. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.